Welcome to Hey Listen, where we discuss faith, leadership, and the mission of the church. We're so glad you've joined us. Now to today's episode. All right, today we are going to have a conversation about what it means to be a Southern Baptist, some of the advantages to that, and some of the things that we have to watch out for. You and I were just visiting. We've been Southern Baptist our whole lives. So tell a little bit about your background as a Southern Baptist.
Yeah, so I remember my earliest memories were going to church in a little Southern Baptist church. I don't know, on a good day, we would maybe have 100 people in worship. So it was a small, and most Southern Baptist church congregations are small.
Absolutely, that's very average.
Majority of them are just like what I grew up in. And so I just remember all those. It's an old timey Southern Baptist church in Brookport, Illinois. And I remember you had to climb up it. So the stairs, the sanctuary was on the upper level. I guess they just, back then, if you were in a wheelchair or something, you were just out of luck. I mean, it was built totally terrible.
Yes.
You would never build a building like this today. And I remember those stairs because when I would get in trouble in worship, which was a lot, we would go out on the stairs. And let's just say those are not happy Southern Baptist memories. But yeah, I've always felt like God called me to be in the ministry because I was such a troublemaker. It was the only way he could keep me, under his thumb.
That's awesome.
But you were raised in church too. Some of your early memories are in the church, right?
Yes, absolutely. Same, very similar. I grew up in North Kansas City. And
were you in trouble as much as me?
No.
Oh, okay, I was going to say, there's no way you were in trouble.
I just got by with a little bit more. Mine was a little more like underhand. I was more sneaky maybe. But
okay.
But I have very vivid memories of sitting in associational annual meetings, like coloring in the pew and my parents knowing everyone. We used to joke, my grandma retired after 35 years of ministry as a associational secretary. Yeah. And we would joke that we would go to a church in Kansas City or in Missouri, and we'd want to stand up and go, if you know Mary Hamby, please raise your hands, because she knew everyone in the Southern Baptist world.
Yeah. So just because, when people see me on Sunday here at church, of course, I'm sure they, Pastor Jeremy or whatever. So I was probably about 6 years old. And at that time, across the street, there was a little convenience store. So we'd go over and get candy before service because, you had to have some candy, right? One time I got those gobstoppers. They're like, I don't know, they're hard candy and they're round. And I was back there and I was popping those in my mouth. Okay, so the sanctuary had one of those sloped wooden floors. I was on the back row, and I was opening up the box, and they just exploded.
Oh,
and
no.
So you could hear,
yes.
And it all went down in front of the pulpit. And my mom, I was sitting over on the right, and my mom was over on the left side of the church, and she just looked back at me because she knew it was me. And I just got that look like, yeah, I'm going to go see Jesus real soon.
Yes.
But no, great memories. It wasn't just all trouble. I remember revivals, being there with my family. I do remember some associational meetings. And when we got a little older, my dad was in he was a part of the administration of a Baptist college. And so he went to some Southern Baptist conventions. I remember some of my first experiences at the Southern Baptist convention were with him and mom and dad. And so really, our Baptist life, was a backdrop really, right? Of everything we did. And I lived right next door to the church. So it was not just, a part of my Wednesday and Sunday. I mean, it was just there. The church was kind of always just there.
Absolutely. That's how I was. My dad was on staff. He was a music minister when I was growing up, and he's in kids ministry now too. But we were...
Runs in the family,
It
huh?
does.
Yeah, cool.
And on both sides, Chris's mom, my husband's mom, is a kids minister. So my kids now, these grandkids they are through and through little Southern Baptist.
Well, I think we've established the fact that we can speak for Southern Baptists because we've been around not only the local church, but some of our denomination. And that Southern Baptist life is really different than other denominations. And our heritage goes back to the mid 19th century, the 1840s, 1845, and really the culture was from the South, and we'll talk a little bit about that here in a little bit. But really, over the years, what we've seen is that the Southern Baptist Convention has been one of those mainline denominations that has stayed true to biblical principles. And there have been times where they've had some stances, even especially in the society and politically, that weren't necessarily the best years and years ago. But for the most part, what we see and what I've seen in my lifetime is that there's been a very strong emphasis on the Word of God and trying to be a biblically based denomination. And I think that's why the denomination has become the largest in the world. Over 47,000 autonomous churches. And what really and we get to celebrate it here at Ridgecrest quite often because we are mission minded as a congregation. We have a big missions week coming up here not too long from now, and every year we do that. And some of those missionaries are independent, but some of them are connected with the Southern Baptist Convention. And one of the great advantages of the Southern Baptist Convention is those 47,000 churches cooperate financially, and it's called the cooperative program, which is 100 years old this year. So kind of interesting, and it started in Murray, Kentucky, not too far from here, about 6 hours from where we are right now, and very close to where I grew up.
Right.
And so that cooperative idea was back in the early 1900s. What we were seeing as Southern Baptists, there were all these wonderful missions causes, and so every church was kind of doing its own thing. And somebody there in Western Kentucky said, "Wait a second, if we could combine our efforts, we could do more." And so the cooperative program gives us an opportunity to collect our funds. And then what that means is we have missionaries that we can support full time. So a missionary that goes through the IMB process actually has a salary and benefits and everything like you would have maybe as a pastor at a church. And so because of that, we have 3,522 international missionaries.
Just incredible.
I mean, that's a huge number. No denomination can come close to that.
Right.
And what really blew me away when I was looking up some of the numbers, we also have almost as many missionaries domestically in the North American Mission Board, 3,299.
Right. I was surprised by that when I saw that number.
Isn't that crazy?
Just mind-blowing.
Yeah. So we're looking at not quite 7,000 missionaries from one denomination. And when we're talking about those missionaries, those are individuals that aren't just like affiliated with us. These are people that have often gone through our seminaries. These are people who are we're paying those salaries just by cooperating with the cooperative program. Right. And that's exciting. And again, most other denominations, if they do have missionaries that are a part of their denomination, they don't have nearly that many. And so when people ask, why would you be a Southern Baptist? Why would you continue to be a part of that? Well, I would say, well, because it gives us an opportunity to do missions in a way that is unique.
Absolutely.
And maybe the best system that's out there.
My kids often ask, when we're driving down the road, is that church like ours? Or, and even a Baptist church. And that's what, that's the big distinction. And that's what I often tell them is it's where our missions money goes is different. Yeah, right. And so that is such a distinguishing factor of Southern Baptist. Yeah. And Southern Baptists have a, we could cooperate better, honestly. But, when you have a Southern Baptist church, it's operating very independently. They don't, I believe you me, they don't want another church coming and telling them what to do. Sure. I've seen a little bit of that in my life. And that's good, but it also, those churches can sometimes be a little too independent. And I think it's good to be in fellowship with other Southern Baptist churches and to be encouraged by them. And really, when you look at Southern Baptist life, the 47,000 churches, most of those are 60, 70 people in average attendance. And so by cooperating, a church that's a little bit larger might be able to provide some extra help. Like if you think about it, if a small church has their pianist go down with a cold, do they have someone else to step up? And if you have good relationships with other churches, you might be able to grab, if a church has two pianists, they can come over and help out or something like that. And I'm just using that as a silly example. But the whole point is that autonomy is fine until it isn't. Until you need some help. Yeah, but that cooperation is huge.
It's huge. But at Southern Baptist, one thing that's a little different than maybe, say, a more high church scenario, maybe a Presbyterian or something like that, or Lutheran. So they'll follow a liturgy. They'll have a little bit more. They may be in the same passage of Scripture. The pastor may be in a similar part of the Bible. Baptists have just never done that. That's not true. So when you go to a Baptist church, you just never know what you're going to get. Whereas you go to certain denominations and it doesn't matter where you travel, they're going to be basically in the same area.
Sure.
So, that's one thing. Some people may like that consistency, but in Baptist life, it really can be different. So every church is autonomous. And what that means is the worship, the preaching, the way they do small groups, the way they do missions, it's going to be a little different in each one of those churches. So if that kind of variety. So when you go if you move to a new community and you go to just the First Baptist Church you come to, and you're used to, okay, I think a Southern Baptist church should look like this, you're going to be disappointed. It's going to be different.
Right.
And so that can be a strength or a weakness. But really, when it comes to giving, $9.5 billion in giving, which $446 million of that is in missions giving. That's just incredible. Yeah. We have 6 seminaries now around the country with around almost 25,000 students being trained theologically. Wow. And, we have, in my view, the best seminary in of the Southern Baptist seminaries here in Kansas City. We have Midwestern, and I have the privilege of preaching there here in November. But that place, every time you go on their campus, it is alive and vibrant. There's just so many people who are training to do ministry there, but they're just doing life well on that campus. Dr. Allen has just done a fantastic job. But I can tell you, I went to Southwestern in Texas back in the late 90s, and at that time I think it was the largest at that time. And just the fellowship and the experiences I had there as a seminarian. And by the way, if you are a Southern Baptist and you go to a Southern Baptist seminary, half of your tuition is paid by the cooperative program. So we not only have the seminaries, but we, through the cooperative program, support individuals who want to go and get a seminary education. Yeah, so these are all huge advantages of being a Southern Baptist.
Yeah. So those are a lot of facts and figures, a lot of numbers. How do those figures really connect to our everyday church life? How do we see that play out?
Well, here at our church, what we try to do is, and Ridgecrest has historically tried to give around 10% of what it brings in to cooperative efforts. So we do 8% that goes to the state and national convention, and we do 2% that stays in our association. And so that 10% is a big number. It is. For our church. But so that's how it, from a financial standpoint, that's how it plays out. But also, it really is just, it's great that we can have, I think we had 3 young men that we sent to seminary last year. We were able to send them to Kansas City, and that was really, really a blessing for our church to see 3 young men going off to ministry. Another thing I would say is that as Baptists, where it really kind of touches down is the Baptist Faith and Message 2000. We have a very simple. It's not as complex or robust as, say, what our Presbyterian friends might have for their statement of faith. It's very, very robust, the Westminster. But the Southern Baptist Convention has always had a more pared down. And so we have the Baptist Faith and Message 2000, which is built on the Baptist Faith and Message, I think it was 1963, which then another one in 1925. And then you go all the way back to the... You have I think it's the 1689 London Confession. So there's a long history there. But what's interesting is that it really is a pretty, it's not, I don't want to say broad. It's just not, it's not as tight as some denominations have. And the reason why is Southern Baptists have tried to keep, if I can use a political analogy, in politics, they talk about having a big tent where you have all these different people from diverse backgrounds as a part of the party. Baptists have had a similar idea that they want to allow, if we say we're autonomous, then we want to cooperate and yet allow for there to be a little bit of theological differences. For instance, you can have a church that's a Southern Baptist church that's very Reformed. And then right down the street, you can have another cooperating Southern Baptist church that isn't Reformed. It's more Arminian free will. And both of those churches come together in an association, a state, and a national convention to do missions and ministry together. And we don't see that as a problem. We understand that there's going to be some difference on soteriology, which is salvation, and the process of that. Those are arguments that are big arguments that have been historically there in Baptist life. And so I kind of like that. I've studied with the Presbyterians, and they're very, okay, you're going to be Reformed if you're a Presbyterian. That's just the way it is. And I understand that. But at the same time, with cooperation, when you get narrow, you're going to narrow your resources.
Yeah.
And so one of the advantages for Baptists is we have been able to have a lot of people in the fold. 47,000 churches. That's a lot of churches.
It is. Mm-hmm.
But to have that many churches, you're going to have a little bit of flexibility. Some people, some of the folks I've met in my Christian walk, they would say, "Oh, no way! I don't want all that craziness. I want you to think just like me." And I will tell you. Have you been to the Southern Baptist Convention much?
I have not. I've just been to Missouri Baptist, but I have not been to Southern Baptist.
Well, Missouri Baptist has around 1,800 churches. But that's still a lot.
It is.
Right?
Yeah. I'm always amazed at that.
And I've served denominationally as an officer and done different things. And I tell people all the time that what it boils down to is this. If you've ever been to a family reunion, right? There's always that one uncle that's insane. Like he's crazy. All right. And you just tolerate him because he's family, right? Well, that's what we get when we go to the Southern Baptist Convention. There's some crazy uncles in there. And you're going to, and they always grab a microphone when it comes to the business section.
Yes.
And they're going to say things and you go, "Oh, there goes my crazy uncle again." He's losing his mind. It's good theater, as far as that goes. But as long as you can kind of tolerate that to a certain extent. And then when you get to the Southern Baptist Convention and you get this, wow, I mean, often 10,000 people in a room. Oh my goodness. And the denomination is much stronger in the South. So your big states are Texas and Georgia and Florida, right? We're tiny compared to them as far as a state, right? But that deep South, you'll see a lot of seersucker suits.
Yes.
And again, there's a little bit of attitude sometimes when you get into the deep South and those bigger churches and everything. And my mom said one time, she said she loved going to the Southern Baptist Convention because it was the only place where she could see men, pastors who could strut sitting down. So, once we get past our pride issues, we can be a great group of people. But no, I don't know. Here's what I tell people all the time. The younger pastors are sometimes really suspicious of getting involved in the Missouri Baptist Convention or the Southern Baptist Convention. And here's what I tell them all the time. I remember how it felt when I was young and I would go to these conventions and hear these crazy things being said on the microphones and everything. But what I've noticed, and I've been watching now for a long, long time, for 30 years, there's always those more radical voices. But I have watched as the people of God gathered in a room, guided by the Holy Spirit, always end up in a good place.
Yes.
I've just seen it again and again, where people will show up at the convention and say, "Oh, this is the year. We're falling apart. We're gonna lose the Southern Baptist Convention." And what I've seen is that the voice of reason prevails. One time I was at one of these conventions, and it was years and years ago. And I don't remember what the issue was, but there was a big issue, and it was one of those years everybody showed up. It was a bigger crowd than normal, thinking that the world was going to collapse, and so everybody's fired up. And I remember it's so fun. These conventions are fun because you're just around people from all over the country, all over the world. And so there's this guy behind me, and he's sitting there, and someone asked him, said, "Well, you think the convention's going to split?" And he said, "Yeah, maybe." And you could tell he was kind of a funny guy, and so the guy says, "Well, if it splits, which direction are you going? Which party are you going with here, this group or that group?" He said, "I'm going with the annuity board." He said, "Whichever side gets my retirement money, I'm going with them."
That's awesome.
So, if you're into comedy, just go to the Southern Baptist Convention, because you hear things like that, just hilarious. I mean, these guys these pastors are fun and clever and ornery. And so if you're fun and clever and ornery, go to the convention. You'll have a good time.
Yeah. And I just, I've never attended, but I've, watched some of their live stream stuff. And so where there's the comedy and the, tension, there's also the beauty of worshiping together with people from around the world, or the commissioning of IMB partners, and how powerful that is to be there firsthand to see.
Yeah. Our good buddy Luke, who was on staff here, he loves going to conventions. He loves it more than me. And we were in New Orleans together right before he took a pastorate. And but I've noticed that he's been a little more consistent in going to those conventions lately than me. But he always highlights that
Yes.
he always talks about how meaningful the commissioning is. And most people who have a mission heart, it's unforgettable to see that many missionaries being commissioned. I mean, obviously, we talked about 3,000 plus.
Incredible.
So hundreds get commissioned every year. And a lot of times at these conventions, it's scores of families being commissioned. And then also, the worship. Anytime that you can have 10,000 people singing to Jesus together. And it just reminds you, I think that in ministry sometimes, Kayla, we feel... especially when we're in a smaller church, and I've been there, right? In a rural area, you feel so all alone sometimes, and you feel like you're fighting this losing battle. And then you show up at Nashville or Orlando or wherever the convention is, and you see that there are 10,000 other pastors there that are trying to do what you're doing.
Yes.
And there's something about that. You feel like you're part, I remember as a kid, we'd sing, I'm in the Lord's army.
Yes.
You really are.
Yes.
But anyway, we do feel like that we are part of something much larger, and that's good. Like,
absolutely.
I know, it's good to be independent, but the older I get, the more I see in church life anyway, we are so much stronger when we can cooperate together.
Yes. And I think, we see that at an associational level here. I think about, I get to serve with our local VBS associational team, and we share supplies and we encourage each other. We do a training all together for, where we have resources. We're doing that, I feel like, really well at our church. Yep. Well, there's no reason not to invite other churches. But I also feel, when I get to be together with other kids ministers, especially that are in Southern Baptist churches all over the United States, there's just something about leaving going, oh, I'm not the only one going through this.
Yes.
That networking is so important for a church leader, a lay leader, remembering there's other people in the trenches with you.
Yeah, absolutely. And the seminaries have done a good job lately at the convention of having these breakout sessions where they're very intentional about encouraging pastors, giving them books, giving them resources. And so when you go to the Southern Baptist Convention now, you have this literal smorgasbord of different meetings you can attend. And you don't have to have been a graduate of one of those schools, but you can go get a lunch and then get some encouragement.
Sure.
And get the resources that you need. And, it is true that ministry is hard, and it's great to have some encouragement, but we want to be careful there too. We don't want to go to the convention, just assuming that everybody's having a hard time. It's also good to go and see that some churches are really growing.
Yeah, and get to celebrate with
them. The growth of the kingdom together. Yeah. But I would say, as a Southern Baptist, there's a couple things that really, I think, make it that make it good to be a Southern Baptist. One, there is enough autonomy where the local church can be the local church, and yet the local church can also be connected with the larger church and its work in the world. So kingdom work and Great Commission work. I'm gonna say it this way. The Great Commission is a beautiful, beautiful challenge to the church. That is a hard thing to do. When I was 19 years old at a church with 60 people in average attendance, doing foreign or international mission trips was really hard to do.
Sure.
But because of the cooperative program, I knew that if I gave $1 to Lottie Moon, I was participating in the Great Commission.
Yes.
So what I see as a big advantage of the cooperative program is that we are able to be a better Great Commission church because we're not having to do everything, from Jerusalem to Judea, Samaria to the uttermost. We don't have to have a real concentrated plan for all those things. We can just participate, and we've got International Mission Board, Uttermost. We have the North American Mission Board, Samaria. And then that gives me, as a small church pastor, the ability to focus a little bit more on the church community and the associational level, because those are areas where I can cooperate more readily. Sure. Right? And I don't have to spend, to go to the Southern Baptist Convention now, it's very expensive.
Absolutely.
I mean, a family going to the Southern Baptist Convention,
travel
your
and
church
housing.
has to have, what, 3 or 4, I'd say at least a couple $1,000.
Oh, absolutely.
Maybe not 3,000 or 4,000, but these these hotels in the big cities are a couple $100 a night minimum, and then travel to get there and that kind of thing. And so that's the one thing that worries me, is that it's really hard for the smaller churches to be involved, because they're having to do these convention halls in big cities. There aren't that many cities that can do 10,000 people.
Sure.
Right? You just can't go to the local Embassy Suites usually. Now that's where we do that, and we can do that in the state of Missouri.
Sure.
We do one in Branson now, in St. Louis. We rotate because those two areas are set up for it, right?
They can handle that, yeah.
But it's New Orleans, it's Nashville, Orlando. I mean, you've got to go to a pretty big area.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So we have just a few minutes left. We've talked a lot about advantages, but are there a few disadvantages, not to end on a poor note, but is there anything that we need to just address as a disadvantage that could potentially show up?
Yeah, I have a good friend, Neil Franks. He was a pastor at First Baptist Branson for a long time. He is so smart and funny. He was preaching at the Missouri Baptist Convention, and he said, look, the Southern Baptist Convention, one of our failures is we get kind of stuck and think that ministry has to be like it used to be. And he said, hey, if the 1950s ever come back around again, we'll be ready for it. So yeah, and I'll never forget he said that. And he said that at the Missouri Baptist Convention to a lot of churches that are stuck in the 1950s. So I would say that's one disadvantage, is that we have been so successful in the past that we might be tempted to not be sensitive to the Spirit moving and some change. So that's one disadvantage. I would say another disadvantage is that the name Baptist has been hijacked.
Right.
Even here, not too far, Kansas City
somewhere
area,
in that area.
Westboro Baptist, right? And they haven't been in the news in a long time, but boy, they just were spewing hate out there.
Still and so, a well-known name.
Right. So people would ask me, are you that kind of Baptist? No, we are not that kind of Baptist. So don't just because a church has Baptists in it, don't. Remember, each church is autonomous. Don't judge one and say that affects the other. The final thing I want to say here is, the Southern Baptist Convention began in 1845, separating from the Northern Baptists because of slavery. So our convention really began on a dark note, an ugly note, I would say is a better way to put it. And what we want to do is just admit that even people who are trying to do right sometimes make some pretty big mistakes. So people say, well, should we even be part of the Southern Baptist Convention because they had that issue? Here's what I say. Southern Baptist, we should be the most humble of all denominations, because we've made some pretty big mistakes.
Sure.
And we have, I think, atoned for those publicly and meeting after meeting over the years. But here's the thing. We want to make sure that even if we are the biggest denomination, we should never be overtly or overly proud. We need to be a humble people that see that our cooperation is Great Commission focused. But let's end on that. I would say this: if you want to be a part of a local church that is most effective in Great Commission work, I think you need to give a Southern Baptist church a good look.
Absolutely. I sure am thankful to be able to serve and raise my family here at Ridgecrest, but at a Southern Baptist church.
Amen.
Thank you again for joining us today. We'll see you next time on Hey Listen.